I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George, I hop in the Porsche, it's 5 and a horse, I'm ready for war, I'm coming for throats, to turn to a ghost, I need to know everything.
Hello and welcome to the Counter Narrative Show. I'm your host, Rasheem. Tonight's episode is Queer Religion. We are joined by two very special guests. I'm really excited about getting into this topic. This queer religion topic is really kind of connected to an art series that I recently did in Baltimore. It's a art series, and it's the title of it, you could have guessed, is Queer Religion. And what it is really just exploring these ways in which queerness and religion has sometimes been seen as dichotomous, very separate things. But you know, most of my audience, you probably know that that is not true. And I've invited these particular two guests here because they are they run a podcast. It is called Rev No Church. And I'm just going to give a little bit of background on who they are and what Rev No Church is about. And then we're just going to get straight into the questions around that. Here we go. Oh, wow. There we go. All right. So, Two Revs No Church. Two Revs No Church is a podcast with a visual component that is led by two queer women of color, Rev The Saint and Rev Megan, that takes God out of the religious box and into an open, liberating space. Two Revs No Church is what is missing within the theological community and sacred spaces. From their words, we believe that the sacred space is not in the church building, not just in the church building, but is also where community and spirit gather for intentional purpose of love, connection, and understanding. And the motto of Two Revs No Church is pray and play. This is who we are. This is who we are, and that's their motto. So I'm going to actually go ahead and get into talking to them and let them kind of do a little bit more explaining about their background and who they are and how they even got started. If you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat. If you are watching this later on YouTube, you can still add your questions to the chat, and I'll try to make sure that I get that information to them. So without further ado, Rev The Saint, Rev Megan, thank you so much for joining the Counter Narrative Show.
Yeah, we're excited to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
I appreciate y'all so much. So I'm going to start with you, Rev The Saint. Tell us a little bit about your background and exactly how did you come to this work?
The work of a minister.
Yes.
Shell. I am Rev The Saint. I am originally from Miami, Florida. I am of Haitian descent. I'm Caribbean in all sense. It runs through my blood. Sac passe to all my Haitian. It is Haitian Heritage Month, so sac passe out there, yes. And so, you know, I how did I come into this work? How did the work find me? I really believe that we all kind of come into this world with already knowing what we're called to do. And I believe that, you know, that I am divine. I've learned since that I am a divine being who have come with a particular mission to fulfill some particular work. And that is definitely aligned with faith and spirituality. I am a lover of all things sacred. I think I wrestle with it more than anything else, with God. Me and God be going at it. You hear me? And this is not the Christian God. This is not the Muslim God. This is just God, the divine, the source, and like just always questioning, why am I here? What have I come to do? Why is this happening to me? And in that quest in my wrestle with God, I've sought out different faith traditions, spiritual practices to kind of get to the answer. And, you know, we always are looking outwardly for the answer, and the answer for me now, almost 40 years old, has been that not only am I the question, but I am the answer. So
That was good. That was go ahead. I'm sorry. I just had go ahead.
So yeah, I mean, this is how the work has finally caught up with me, and I have accepted it. Because in the beginning it is, how do you come into the work? It's a search, it's a quest, right? And then you realize, hopefully we all get to that stage in our life if we're in search for truth, is that you are divinely aligned with this time, this space, to do the very thing that you're called to do. And you finally catch up with that truth and you live it out.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing it. I feel like that's so interesting, that connection between we come into this world knowing what we are divinely here to do, and also still grappling with that, right? Like knowing that that's our calling or that's what we've been here to do, but still having this back and forth tug of war about that. I'm going to ask you a little bit more about that later on. I want to go over to Rev Megan. Tell us a little bit more about you and exactly how did you come to this work?
How did I come to this work? So my name is Rev Megan. I came to a kicking and screaming. Kicking, literally. Kicking, screaming, nights crying. I tell folks I had two callings. One calling is into my sexuality, into my queerness. And right after I accepted and knew that calling and I answered it, God was like, okay, now that you've accepted your divine self, let me tell you all this. God will call you to your divine self before God comes to you and says, this is what I need for you to do. Because what's important to God is that you recognize your divine self and that you don't match that up against what the world is telling you to do. So God called me to my divine self, to my queerness. And then after that, God called me into ministry. And when God called me to ministry, I said, well, God, what do you want me to give up? What do you need me to do? What do you? And God was just like, nope, just come as you are. But I came kicking and screaming because it was like, how do I do this? Like, what? Like, I didn't grow up in the church. My mother was very much an emotional churchgoer. We went when she was upset, when she was sad. So, I wasn't in Sunday school. I went to seminary and they were talking about liturgy. And I was like, what the heck is a liturgy? And they're like, that's the worship. That's the form of worship in church. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that. So I came having and building and wrestling with, as Rev The Saint said, wrestling with my concept of God. It wasn't, I didn't have a concept of church, which I'm glad I didn't. I was wrestling with and being pulled toward my concept of God and who God is and how God shows up in my life.
Wow. So much similarity in that aspect of like that resistance to it. Can I hear from you both about like, what was that, what fed that resistance? What made you resistant to the calling?
Everything.
Oh, shoot, that's a whole, listen, I mean, I was raised in the church. My parents are not super religious. My parents are immigrant, first generation immigrant coming into this world, trying to figure out life and raise a family. And my great aunt was the first person to always bringing us to church, and then it was somebody else. And so I shared that to say that I got to see the ins and outs of church. Church was the place where I loved to be and hated to be at the same damn time.
That's how I feel.
It was the place that you got scolded, but then you had that lady in that same pulpit giving you that candy, that mint candy. You know what I'm saying? So, it was the place that you were celebrated and scolded, and it was fearful because church also was that place where they made you so afraid of God. My foundation of church was always this God that was fearful, that was out to get me, that anything that I did wasn't right, and yet God was love, right? And so I think that was for me, my biggest resistance, because it's like, why are you calling me to this place knowing that you mortal man that I am, you sinful man that I am. And I use the word man because those, terminology, not for gender, but yeah. And so why are you calling me knowing all, you know my shit, God. And you know what these people in the church is gonna do to me. So so I resisted that. I did not want to be part of that particular church culture. And yet, and still, there was this relationship that I was cultivating, I was building with the divine that seemed so counter narrative. Want to drop that word to
appreciate that.
Yeah. I got you. We Virgo sisters.
Oh, Lord. It is not that season, Joe.
But counter narrative to what I had experienced in the church. Like, I was experiencing something totally different. I was really experiencing a love that was divine, like despite who I was, like in spite of who I was, like, or because of who I was, God was even loving me even more because of the journey I had experienced, because of the heartache, because of what God has called me to do. I am going to love you through this because I need you to get to this point where I'm gonna need you to love other people through whatever it is that they're going through. And so, yeah, that's the resistance, because church work is hard work and it's hurtful work.
Yeah.
Even knowing this, you're still being pulled and called to it.
No, I can, even as you're saying it, I'm seeing that connection where it's a place where you've been raised, there's community there, and there's also this history, this hurt, this pain. And so that's like a difficult space to navigate. Reverend Megan, you said something earlier that I found just like so beautifully said, and I really would love for you to expound on it. And you said not only were you called to the ministry, but you were also called to queerness. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
So, for me, I honestly believe that even though folks can be queer and engage and that can be your identity, right? But you don't have to live it out loud. So you don't have to, that's your business. I do believe God was calling me to live it out loud. Like I felt it. I felt the pulling. I felt no, you're not running from telling your family, because you're going to show up on Christmas and you're going to show up in your fullness and you're not going to be ashamed. I felt a pulling to live that aspect of me. I felt that calling to live that aspect of me out loud. And I understand why, because it's totally connected to the ministry, to the flow of the way God has allowed me to move in life. It's really connected me to that, because it's almost as if God was saying, child, I don't need you to run from yourself, because I need to move in you. So if you run from yourself, you're going to run from me, and you won't be able to do what I've called you to do. So that's my story. That may not be anyone else's story. I'm not telling anybody to run out there. If you are queer, to run out there and live out loud. I'm telling you, this is my story. This was part of my calling. Yeah.
I love that. And I've never heard anyone really say it in that particular way. You know what I mean? That their queerness is something that they were called to. But I could definitely see how showing up, living in your fullness, and still in pursuit of this particular path is work, is a mode of spiritual practice, and something that I can imagine that a person is called to.
Rasheem, I'm sorry, can I interject just for a minute?
Yeah, please.
I think for those who are listening, and I think this point is necessary, and I think this is a universal truth. And I've shared this with Megan before, and I know Megan is saying that she's called to queerness, but I think we are all called to ourselves. Your calling is to yourself first, your highest self, the alignment of who you be, in order for you to do that which you are called to do in this life, in this realm of life. You know, life doesn't end once you die. Life continues on. We may not know what life was there before we got here. We made certain agreement before these souls enter these bodies to live it out, and it will continue. So just to translate or kind of make clear, I think for everyone, this universal truth is that we are indeed called to ourselves and to our highest self. So I just wanted to make that clear.
And that's your first call. That's your first
Woo!
Calling.
Sorry, I do that when I'm.
I usually jump and run, but I'm so used to it. Plus,
that's your first call.
That your first calling is to yourself. That's your first calling when you wake up. That's your last calling before you go to bed. It's like you are bookended by the possibilities of you.
And this is not ego, please.
No, it's not.
Like, I'm calling to myself. No. The only way that we are able to show up as ministers, like really show up for other people, is because we are aligned and we are true to who we are, so that we can reflect that which, because if you believe in the idea of Ubuntu, you know, I am because you are, you know, therefore you are. Namaste, you know what I'm saying? Or love your neighbor, do unto others as they do unto you. You see, all of these, and these are all different walks of life, these sayings, but they're all the same. You know, being able to reflect back that which you are, and seeing yourself in other people. All of this is the universal truth that I believe we are all called to come into. Some of us are just unable to sit with ourselves long enough, deal with ourselves long enough to come to that realization, so that we can be a part of a community.
And it's hard because you have to come to terms with your mess too. We don't just sit up here talking about coming to terms with the sermon we preached and how well the prayer was. No, we sit up here and go, you know what I did last week? You know, so we sit in it with our mess, and that ain't easy.
I feel like that's such a profound message, that your first calling is to show up and be your full self. It reminds me of something that I've told my daughter. I told her, you owe it to yourself to become who you were meant to be. But I really love the fullness of that.
He almost made me shout.
Oh, okay.
I forgot I gotta be in. You see, when that
happens,
that's why I'm trying to lock her in. I'm trying to be like, come on,
seatbelt on.
No, I totally get that. I want to hear more, Reverend Megan, about the ways in which you not having that similar background as Rev The Saint, in terms of like growing up in the church and knowing these particular terms, how that supported and helped you in your journey.
Supported and helped me. It was hard, because I'll give you this story. It's going to be really fast. I was in my last year of seminary. I was in an African-American worship studies class, whatever. And they were talking about when you are baptized, if you say, Father, you're baptized in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, does that count as well as if you just say, if you baptize someone and say you're baptized in the name of the Father and Son and don't mention the Holy Spirit? So they were talking and talking. I was sitting there like, this is some BS. What are we talking about? It's people outside hungry. And we talk about, does the baptism matter if you, and I'm looking and I'm just like, so I don't know why. The professor, I think, felt my defiance and looked at me and was like, and looked at me and was like, well, Megan, what do you think? I said, I think this is silly. I think in a couple of years, I said in 5 years, we won't be talking about this as the church. And if as the church, you are still talking about this, there is something wrong. I said, do you understand what our children are dealing with? And we sitting up here debating about baptism? I said, I truly don't care about baptism. And they just looked at me. No one liked me in the class. So I say this.
Let me tell you.
I say this because it was challenging. It was challenging.
That's good. No, I think that's a good point, Meg, because here's somebody who was born and raised in the church, and I was baptized. And I was 13 years old when I was baptized, because that's the age of understanding in the Baptist church, right? And I was baptized two other times after that because of all of these doctrines and dogmas of things. Because I'm like, oh, did I really get baptized? Oh, am I getting in heaven? No, seriously. And
it's not funny, but I'm sorry.
No, but that's what it does. You know what I'm saying? And then I was like, no, this feeling the same way. Like, why am I doing this? Like this stuff. I mean, my last baptism, I was literally in seminary. In seminary. Get baptized again.
I never heard this. Wow.
I know.
We don't have to talk about that.
No, we don't gotta talk about this. But listen, I'm good on. I got the Father 3 times. I got the Son and I got the Holy Ghost. Listen.
You probably gonna need a 4th.
I am the 4th. Hello. I am the daughter Messiah. Hello, somebody. Okay. Not getting martyred for nobody though. Let's be clear.
I feel like that super highlights the ways in which churchiness could get in the way of your spiritual experience, rules, like the way, do this, sit like this, dress like this, don't say this, so many different religious ideologies that come with all of these different rules about how to show up as a human being and not about showing up as your full self. Right. So if anything, one of the things that you said earlier, Megan, was, what I got to give up, what I got to stop doing, which is a way of like, it's a way of like, I feel like it's one of the ways in which we're not told to be ourselves. So that was very interesting in sharing. Rev The Saint, the title of your podcast is Two Revs, No Church. Tell me about why no church. Why is that in the title?
So it's funny, but so it came about. I have to tell you the story of how the name came about. Megan was at work and I was home. I'm self-employed, and my own experience wrestling, I'm like, I ain't got no church. And so we were like trying to think of a name. And I just randomly said to Meg, because I ain't got no church, that since we're two Revs, no church. And so I jokingly said this. Meg was like, that's it. But when we break it down seriously, like we are not a part of a church per se. Even though we were ordained, I'm Baptist, Meg is UCC.
Let's make sure they know what that means. It's United Church of Christ. I just want
to. And we do not have a congregation. Like I do not have, like I've done interim pastor before. I've been an associate pastor. I actually this year left the church, like seriously decided that the church, the structure, the brick and mortar is no longer for me, though my calling is still intact. I know what I'm called to do. So I mean, that's the concept, just two Revs who've been trained, who've been ordained, who have lined up the word for themselves and experienced God, and taking out the brick and mortar structure of the idea of what we think that is church. I think the name itself will draw more people to take part of the gathering in which, we hope to build with this podcast.
That definitely makes sense to me. Another part of the blurb about Two Revs No Church that I read, Reverend Megan, is there's a section that says Two Revs No Church is what is missing within the theological community and sacred spaces. Can you tell us more about what it is that Two Rev No Church offer that hasn't been offered or that is missing?
Wow. That was in the blurb, wasn't it? So it is. It's there. It's there. So I think what it is that, you know, I'm gonna say it like this. I was trying to think of a very intelligent answer, like intelligent sounding, but this is just it. Is that we are real with it. We come like one episode for our podcast, which will be launched in June. One episode, we end up crying together at the same damn time. And we didn't plan. So we're very transparent. We are not here to flaunt what we know in terms of what we learned necessarily in seminary. We're here to struggle with how we are showing up and how we are being in a world where we are connecting with our God self and also with the divine. So that's why it's different, because we're not here to tell you like, to pray this many times. We're just here to tell you like, look, this is a challenge and this is a struggle and we're going through it too. But at the same time, there's joy, there's promise, there's hope in it. And where are you? And that's the tension that we're standing in.
Yeah, and we don't perform, we don't rehearse. One of the things that when we come to our seats, all we have are topics that we mapped out last year in 2020. We have topics, we have scripture. We don't discuss, you know, what we're going to say. We're two Revs, but sometimes we have two opposing opinions on certain topics. And we just allow ourselves to unfold right before the people. And that's really different. Let me tell you, I was trained to, yes, be prepared in and out of season, know your words, know your scripture or whatever, but also like, know the text enough, bring yourself to the text. But there's a lot of studying that's happening. And one of the things that I always love to say is that we are the living text. We are our own canons. And so we are able to bring our own lived experience to this life and speak on the divine in that way. That's what sacred text is, all of them. You know, they are recorded life experience of how people journey with themselves, with God, and with others. And so if we are already doing that, we've already created a sacred text within ourselves, we can do that. We can show up and say, yo, this is how I have journeyed with myself, with others, and with the divine.
Yeah, so if I could,
Go ahead.
So one of the things that, if I could just mention my denomination again, UCC, United Church of Christ, the motto of the UCC is God is still speaking, meaning the last book of the Bible is Revelations. That is not the last time that God spoke. And a lot of people get uncomfortable when I say this, is that the Bible should not form your life. It should inform it in some way, but it should not form it, because like Rev The Saint said, is that we are all walking testimonies and books of the Bible. So if you think you aren't a book of the Bible or a book of a sacred text or book beyond the Bible, right? Whatever sacred text you read, if you don't think that, I need you to revisit yourself and revisit your understanding of who you consider your higher power to be, because you definitely are.
Sure.
Thank you for that. Rev The Saint, another thing that came up in the blurb is both of y'all's intersectional identity, right? It says that it's a visual podcast that is led by two women of color, two queer women of color. Why was it important to make that distinction about your identity?
So it's a visual and audible. So we're doing both because we want to reach the masses because we believe that visualization, representation matter, and the queerness, the womanist part. Why is that important? Is because there are not enough us showing and of representation showing up and to the fullness, right? I am not, I am not one who feel like, my identity is a calling, because my identity, if we had a time to like throw up pictures in my past, like it has changed. I have transformed, and I believe those beings that I was as I transformed and that journey this life, that was me too, right? But where I am now, knowing who I am and who God is, that in itself is a bit queerness. And so some people think that queerness, let me define for me how I understand queerness to be. People limit that to sexual orientation, to gender, your preference. I say that you are they're queer, like talking about queer religion, the fact that you're able to journey and fluctuate through different sacred spaces, that's queerness, right? You're not limited in the box, right? Queerness is being out of the box, exploration, just being able to fully discover and not get fixed in one way of being. So for me, that's how I understand queerness. And so there are times when we sit down, and we're not talking, even though our foundation is Christian. I mean, I'm wearing Buddhist beads right now. You know what I'm saying? We're talking about Muji. We're talking about satsang, sitting and alignment and meditation and mantras. We're talking about all other religious practice and ways of being. I mean, I'm a yogi, certified. Things that I've journeyed and got me to where I am right now. All of those things are important. And to be able to speak that truth, I believe will open up doors, especially for this generation coming up. The reality is that folks ain't coming into the brick and mortar church to hear the word. They're not, like, people are not going to be sitting down for hours to hear the word and hear, a praise and worship. They're not. They are going to look for those individuals who look like them, who are giving a message that that is aligned with who they be. And so this is why we put that out there right then and there. So this, and also when it comes to a time when folks are ready to question, or criticize why we do what we do, there's really no room for pushback, because we've already laid it out there. Is that good? Am I
they're gonna criticize us? Oh, you think so? Everybody's gonna like us. Just
that's good. That's also the flip side of it, because when you see or hear the show, and especially aside from us, the people that we have there. For those folks who are stuck in their own theological framework, when you see and hear these individuals come in all their divine goodness, there's no way that you can deny their own divinity. And if you do, that is something that you need to sit with yourself. If there was a place called hell that folks live in, because I don't know. Yes, we are. If there was a place, I don't believe in the concept of hell. Hell and heaven is in the mind and it is here. Yeah. But if there was a place, those folks who really have the critical eye, are quick to judge with their mouths and their lips, maybe that's where their soul will rest. But I say to those folks, the moment that you're able to critique or think or say something or think something, this is the time that you need to sit with yourself and wrestle with your own theological framework, because these people are divine. There's no way you can deny on who they be.
Thank you for sharing that. So we talked a bit about the aspects of queerness, the importance of, you have it in the blurb about your, the aspects of your identity, and a bit about grappling with even coming to ministry. There are several texts that are cited in like Christian, I'm sure in other religions as well, but the one that I'm most familiar with is Christian.
Taking a lead on this.
It's nothing that you would have to memorize. Let me tell you that, because I'm just going to say them here. So there are several texts often cited by Christians who condemn homosexuality, right? So there is Noah and Ham, Genesis 9. I mean, I won't read each one. Sodom and Gomorrah, Levitical laws. I mean, there's several Romans, several texts that Christians use to condemn homosexuality. Do you ever preach from any of those texts? And if so, what do you say about them?
The first question is no, I don't particularly preach for, so you mentioned Romans, and Romans have what you call the household codes, right? And in the household codes, it's basically putting people in place. Women, this is what you should do. Men, this is what you should do. Children, obey, so these are household codes, right? I don't preach from it, though. I've learned from them. I've done Bible study. I've taught from them, because I think there needs to be a teaching more than a preaching around them. Usually, when I hear folks preach around it, they mostly get it wrong. They don't give content to these particular scriptures, and I know most of the ones that you were mentioning, but I'm going to try to generalize where people get it wrong. And why I don't particularly preach from it. I don't preach from it because most of the people that do not have the ear to hear, Revelation says, for those who have ear, let them hear, right? Most people do not have the ears to hear. Why don't they have the ears to hear? Because they haven't had good teachings around them. And so the teaching must come first. Or if not the teaching, the experience. You must have a lived experience to say like, oh, okay, now I have ears to hear, eyes to see. And in general, most of these texts, the content of what is happening historically, culturally, is that they are establishing community, okay? There's something like, I believe there's the scripture that says to not waste the seed. The seed was the most important, more so than the woman's womb, okay? Understand, women back then were considered, up to like most recent, were considered property. It wasn't the woman, it was her womb that was property. Why? Because this is the place, this is the incubator. This is where we can develop and build a community. You don't waste the seed being sperm, the man's seed, because we need to build community. Why do we need to build community? Because we need to have a community large enough when adversary comes against us, we have an army big enough to do what? Protect our property, to protect our land. And so if everybody is living this queer homosexual life, we are not building our community. The village is small. When we come to get attacked, we don't have enough men in the forefront, hence why male are valued more than women, in the forefront to fight and win over or win over the land, or regain land. So that's what it mainly, and this is really general, this is like really abbreviated. That's what was really about. It was really about building community, building a land, building empire. I think it's so easy to look at the text and look at it in a way that immediately struts homosexuality. But just as you look at that particular text and you're able to do that for those who are homosexuals, you have to also look at, then woman, you be in position. Then slave, those who are slave, right? The household code is there. You be in position if the book says that you are a slave. So act accordingly and obey your masters, right? And so, like, we really need to start looking at the text. Either we're going to follow it full on, which we're not. Look at the world we live in now. or we're going to really discern and we're going to break down the text and see what is going on historically and why the people are operating and functioning the way they are, so that we can understand what's going on. I mean, look at what's happening now, right? 100 years from now, they're going to be like, yo, they were wearing masks because everybody had, I mean, it's not even going to be COVID. It's going to be like everybody, they were wearing masks for whatever reason, make it up. And then that's going to be Bible, right? People are going to believe it to be so, oh, they're not touching each other because they had some type of disease or whatever. But we are the ones that know the truth. We're living this spirit, but how it's recorded, how it's interpreted over time, those interpretations change. And unless you do some deep excavation of the text, knowing what was happening culturally, what was happening historically, like there's the historical context, there's the cultural context. If we don't get that part of the teaching, oh yeah, homosexuality, you are damned to hell. Women, you are damned to hell. Slaves, you are damned to hell because you're not you're not obeying who? The white patriarchy. You're not obeying empire. You're not obeying government. And so if that's the case, if we're following the Bible from that time and interpreting it that way, we are all damned to hell.
And I'm gonna say one thing. There's about 6 or 7 texts out of the entire Bible that talks about homosexuality, and that word did not exist back then. And if we are looking at this from a biblical text, Jesus never says anything about it. So if we are followers, if you are reading the biblical text as your sacred text and you are a follower of Jesus, Jesus never says anything about it. That's like you walking in the house and your mama or daddy or your guardian doesn't say anything about this one thing and you're like, oh, it must not be that important. So you got to think about it like that.
And I'm gonna give you some pushback. I'm Megan, and listen. The pushback is like, well,
this is Rasheem's show. This ain't called Dasha's pushback show.
This is the pushback that we get. I'll get a lot. Like, okay, well, everything about every word of Jesus wasn't recorded, right?
So let me ask this question. From what you were saying, Rev The Saint, is it that the Bible is not a moral code directional book? It is just a historical reference, and those codes and rules were needed for that specific time, but it's not a guiding moral code.
You see, I just shifted.
I see you shifted. I'm about to get off your legs. Go ahead. Morality. Rasheem. The book, sacred texts do have moral components to it. But we all enter this world in different space and time. I say that because if we're looking at the Christian sacred text, and I go to a predominantly Muslim nation, right? And I give this to you to say, this is your moral code. It's not going to work, right? I believe it's really about discernment. There are things that we are able to read and look and like, how do I discern for myself what works for me? There are a lot of the most moral narratives for me that has guided me through the text are the ones that are often not preached about, and it's the women that shows up in the sacred texts. The women that are not named, the women who claim their rights. We talk about the 3 daughters who the father had no sons, and they claimed their father's land. Because they were women, they were denied, and they had to go before the king and said, my father did not have no sons. Do I not get the right to claim my father's land? And so that's a teaching, right? You got Ruth, you got Esther, you got, there's the whole thing, with Naomi. Like there's so many teaching there that can ground us and teach us about how we should show up in the world. And we have to discern when we read the text, what is right, what is just, not only for ourselves, but all that we encounter in this world, all that we encounter, not all who we encounter. When I'm saying the earth is the Lord and the fullness thereof, I'm talking about the animals, I'm talking about the trees, I'm talking about the birds, because even those things are spoken and mentioned in the Bible. So Christian sacred texts. So I think it is important for us to discern. There's a text, I'm going to get to you, Rev Megan, because I feel your energy calling. There's a text that says the Bible is on everything is unfallible, right? And so everything in the Word is, and I wrestled with that for a while, right? I wrestled with that for a while. And I think it is both and. There's a text that will cancel out another text. There's a text that's going to affirm another text, right? And remember, in the beginning of this show, we said that, but you are also a text. And so when a text confronts a text or encounters another text, and this is a text, I'm a text. If it's aligned with me, then I journey on and I discern and I pray and we journey on. If the text does not align with you, find another text. And so you learn how to discern that. And that's what I think about all sacred texts.
Mm-hmm. And this text, specifically the Bible, aligns with you.
The Bible has been my foundation. It's not the only text that aligns with me. The thing that speaks to me, if I'm honest, the thing that speaks to me louder than anything else has always based first and foremost has been music and poetry. And so the arts, I consider myself an artistic minister because it was the arts that allowed me to see God divine in a different way. And so I like to teach God through the arts or show God, explore God through the arts. So for me, a step for Song of Solomon, you know what I'm saying? I don't.
That's some good nighttime.
It's some poetry in there, and so that particular text does speak to me because the way it is written poetically. I love the Message Bible, the Bible remix. When I first got a hand of that Bible, and some people have problems with it, I was a teenager, but I could understand it because it's spoken a way that really spoke to this creative being that I am. And it allowed me to see the Bible differently or understand it. For those who have ear, let them hear, see, let eyes, let them see. And so you have to find that text, that sacred text that aligns with you. Some people it might be Audre Lorde. It might be Toni Morrison, it might be James Baldwin, you know what I mean? And all of these were Howard Thurman, and all of these may be sacred beings. And these individuals have left text for us to read and to explore. And they reference other sacred texts, right? And I think the Bible, the Christian sacred text, in some way, I don't think it'll ever be non-existent, but it's kind of dissolving or it's blending in with other sacred texts where we can glean from it, but it's not going to be the source for moral understanding.
Reverend Megan, did you want to add?
So earlier you said, Rasheem, you asked me, does me not growing up in the church, how was that supported and how did that kind of help me? So because I didn't grow up in the church, I didn't have a relationship with the Bible. I had a relationship with God. See, here's the thing is that when I said earlier that the Bible should inform and not form your spirit, because it's the relationship with God that forms who you are. And then you go to a text like the Bible or another sacred text, and then that informs what God is pouring into you, what God has already and what God has began to pour into you. A lot of folks have a relationship with the Bible and they don't have a relationship with God. And then you begin to speak to them and they're like, well, I don't know, they have a very robotic and just a very robotic way of engaging with their spirit. They don't go beyond the text. They stay trapped in a cage within it, not understanding that God is bigger than the biblical text.
And some think that the very sacred text is God itself.
It's God itself, and that's not true.
Yeah, and so you'll find people spewing off texts all day, every day. Can quote the Bible. Listen. And for me, I can't quote the Bible. I can tell you stories, because that's how my creative mind, like, I know stories. I can tell you the narratives. I can tell you how folks journey with God, but I ain't gonna quote no scriptures. I mean, there was one, for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son, and so whoever believeth in him will not perish, but live eternally. But those are the things, like, foundationally as a kid that I was given. Yeah. Keep it at that.
But I also think this, like, the folks we read about in biblical texts, they weren't walking around quoting biblical texts. They were walking around engaging with God.
They are the one that, listen,
so it's like if we don't engage with God, don't go pick up the Bible until you start engaging with God. I shouldn't say that.
Pick up the Bible. But here's the thing. I mean, if you're going to pick up the Bible, pick it up with a critical eye. Pick it up with a creative eye. Pick it up with a discerning eye. Like,
pick it up with a relationship with God.
And every time you pick it up with whatever eye you choose to open and look at it, that your interpretation, your understanding of that sacred text is going to be different, right? But here's the thing. Everyone who's written the text that we have, and I'm talking about the Christian text because that's my content, no, someone is observing and writing down what they are encountering from base what they are observing. Versus, there are a few books in the Bible where the actual person that actually experienced it is actually writing it down. Let's take the synoptics: Matthew, Mark, Luke, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. John is, but you look at those books, these are individuals who are looking at what is happening and recording it down based on how they are seeing it, based on how they are experiencing it, based on what they think they know about the relationship with Jesus and the disciples. You'll see Peter, like, Jesus ain't saying, hold up for a minute, I know you're about to wash my feet, but I gotta write this down so these folks know. No, Jesus ain't recording these things. And so that is so important to understand, that there is a reason, why did the author write it the way that they did? Why are they reporting it this way? Oh, this author was an attorney. Mm-hmm. Why? What you can tell this? Oh, this author was a fisherman in the language. You know what I'm saying? There's so much more to these texts that we don't give it enough. We don't give it enough excavation to really understand it for ourselves. And that's what we do to people, right? We do that, coming back full circle to queerness. We look at these sacred texts, and because the way they show up in their queerness, and we don't give it no space to really excavate and learn about the other. And so we look at it with our narrow lens and we judge it, and we ostracize it, we marginalize it, we put to the side, and we say it isn't divine, it isn't God, it isn't holy.
Thank you so much for that. So we are getting to the bottom of the hour, and I want to make sure that I am honoring both of your times. Before we close out, I wanted to ask both of you, tell us what is To Rev No Church as a collective up to next? How can people find and follow and engage with the content? Also, I believe both of you individually have things that you're also working on. How can people find, follow, and engage with that information as well? I'm going to start with you, Rev Meg. Megan?
So 2 Revs No Church, just go to Instagram, 2 Revs No Church, number 2 Revs No Church. That's where you can find most of our stuff there and our engagement with you and what we're doing next. You can go to the website also, 2revsnochurch.com. 2revsnochurch.com. You can go to the website and you can sign up for different things there, but really go to the Instagram page, go to the IG page, because we have a lot of videos on there and a lot of things that are coming. So for myself, one thing that I love to do, I'm a chaplain at a psychiatric hospital, but also I do spiritual coaching. And that was birthed from me being a chaplain in a psychiatric hospital. And spiritual coaching is just me helping you to liberate yourself, because sometimes we get in our own way. So I set up things, it's not therapy. There have been moments where people have come to me and gone, well, I need help with this. I'm like, oh, child, that's therapy. We going back to where you were 3. No, I'm gonna send you someplace else. But liberation in terms of the fact that in this moment, you may be experiencing some sort of hardship that you need this wall knocked down and you don't know how to knock it down by yourself. So I walk with you through it. You can go to meganmcleod.com and that's where you find everything about me, meganmcleod.com.
Well, you did 2 Revs No Church. Oh, and I wanted to correct, we preach, pray, and play. Those are our motto. We preach, pray, and play. I am Rev The Saint. You can find me at Rev The Saint on most of like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And one of the things, I'm not, like I said earlier, I'm an artistic minister. I have a platform called TTYL or Not, Theological Talks You Like or Not. And this is where I get the opportunity to sit with some amazing people. And I talk about what they do, how they show up in the world, but also how they journey with the self, divine, and others. It comes out every first and third Sunday, so between 7 and 9. Go on YouTube, check out those shows. They're great conversations that will be wrapping up. I have one more season of TTYL or Not because I really want to focus in on 2 Revs No Church. So I'm in my 2nd season. I got one more season to go, and we'll see where it all go. Follow me on IG, Rev The Saint.
Awesome. Thank you both again so much for coming on the Counter Narrative Show. This has been an episode Queer Religion. If you are watching live, please feel free to share this out. If you are engaging with it later, still share it out. Comment, put something in the comment section. Follow 2 Revs No Church. Follow both Rev The Saint and Rev Megan. Thank you to my guests so much for sharing of your time, your talent, and your energy. I appreciate you. And I would like you both to come back on the show. I'm saying that it's recorded. I want to see your response and I want to record it as well.
What's going on?
We'll be glad to be back.
Thank you very much. And everybody heard that. All right. This has been the Counter Narrative Show. Have a good night.
I need to know everything, who and the what and the where, I need everything. Trust me, I hear what you're saying, but act like it's new what you're telling me. I'm curious, George, I hop in the Porsche, it's 5 and a horse, I'm ready for war, I'm coming for throats, to turn to a ghost, I need to know everything.